Greetings fanboys and fangirls, Jared here with another video review from Fanboys Forever. Today we're going to be having a look at a Masterverse figure. That's right, it's the 6 to 7 inch scaled version of Masters Universe that Mattel does for the modern era. And particularly, I'm always very excited to be having a look at the new Eternia releases. Now, if you're not familiar with Masterverse, they tend to kind of split the figures they do into different factions. They've done a couple of new adventures, several Princess of Power, quite a few Netflix animated figures from both the CGI show and a lot more from the anime series. And lately, a whole lot of new Eternia. These are the figures that are more like the successors to the Masters of the Universe Classics line, in that they're kind of a modern update of those original classic figures with a couple of new spins, sometimes inspired by the concept artwork. You know, after the initial Masters of the Universe resurgence that gave us Origins and Masterverse, it does appear that retail, general retail, is starting to cool a little bit on these guys, and that they're a lot more successful in the direct-to-consumer market, kind of like the old Matty Collector days for Masters of the Universe Classics. This Deluxe for Snout Spout is actually from Mattel Creations and not retail, and that's Mattel's direct-to-consumer website. So I can't wait to have a look at this guy and see if he's a worthy addition to the very impressive new Eternia line. But before we start, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. I do new videos all the time, and even though the Eternia playset right now is barren of other figures, that's because I have cleared it out for Origins so that I can set up all my Masterverse figures. And this will be our next Ultimate Battleground video, so be sure to check that out as well. And with all that out of the way, let's begin. So of course we're going to be having a look at the box art here. Mattel has really kind of got a near never miss reputation when it comes to Masters of the Universe packaging in the modern era. It's the kind of thing that I think another company wouldn't really put near as much work into, but man, do they do it upright every time they do it. This is another fantastic looking painting. I never would have thought in my life I would have seen so much effort put into a Snout Spout painting, but here we are. And it's just a beautiful diorama kind of piece, and you can see all kinds of cool details. On the back, we have another incredible piece that just shows him in the solemn pose, almost like he's this barbarian or something. It's just incredible. There's giant snakes in the background. There's bones everywhere. Snout Spout has never looked so cool in his existence as a character. On the top, you can see that we just have Masterverse, and on the bottom, we have some copyright info and a barcode. Keep in mind that when you open this guy up, it's like a shoebox type of packaging, and you can open it up and get a complete look at that big painting. Once you do open it up, you can see that it is officially labeled as part of the new Eternia faction of products, and you get kind of a glossier, smaller version. And here you can pull this out and check this out. You can actually see his Snout Spout working right here, blasting water with an absolutely awesome effect, and this may be the portion that you would like to frame, especially for the big Snout Spout fans out there. And hidden behind all of that great artwork is Snout Spout himself. Here he is in the box. It's just black through here. And down here we have all of his accessories. It says he's Snout Spout, the heroic water blasting firefighter. All right, that pulls right out. You can see it has contents on it about what's in here. And we have the figure itself. So let's go ahead and get him out of the box. There's quite a few ties back here to loosen, but instead of having to untie these, I suggest just taking a pair of model kit nippers, which I always keep on hand for just this very thing. All right, and we are back. So you can see that we've got Snout Spout right out of the packaging. And of course I had to use some of my fire effects that I just had laying around from various toy lines, just to kind of put him in that firefighting mode, kind of have a diorama going there. And yeah, just, I'm telling you, he has such a great presence. I've really enjoyed just messing around with this guy. Of course, usually when I open these, of course, I turn the camera off and, you know, I take some time to just kind of play around and get a feel of what the figure is actually like. I can't stand watching those reviews where the person, they unbox it and they're just like trying to figure out how the figure works, like the entire review. And after learning all the various ins and outs of this figure, it's time to then show you. So let's begin. So first of all, of course, we have to have a look at the sculpt work. His namesake, the snout that spouts water right here, looks so cool. Now, obviously, you can tell that there's an effects part right here, and we're going to get into that here in a minute. But for now, I'll just remove that so that we can see the snout unobstructed. And a whole lot of the parts are interchangeable, and you can just put them in all kinds of different combinations, but we'll get into that in more of the play features. First of all, we have this incredible head sculpt going right here. And I really like this because it reminds me a lot of how the Four Horsemen envisioned Snout Spout, with a very mechanical looking helmet, or, you know, part of him. I think that just depends on your interpretation of the character, whether Snout Spout is a guy wearing a helmet or this is actually, you know, his form. I think that depends on if you subscribe to the mini comics or what you're thinking of. I've never really known what exactly I think Snout Spout is. I just know that he's a cool firefighter who has a robot elephant head. So I mean, that's take it or leave it, I guess. And I love how those details kind of extend also to the ears and the snout itself, which is of course fully articulated. Now the eyes right here are completely transparent, and so that means that they have a light piping feature on the back. But you can actually see, you know, like a Transformers figure, where the light goes in to create that piping effect. Not only that, but if we pull the trunk away, we can actually see more of his chest harness and the actual chest itself. Now, I'm very impressed with the muscle detail that we have, and clearly this is meant to be, you know, a larger, more deluxe size body. I think that this will be able to be used across multiple characters. Now, what characters this would be good for? Well, I'm not really sure just right off the top of my head, but it's a lot beefier than the standard, you know, kind of buck body that we have with Masterverse, to, you know, kind of be a little more beefy like the original Masters figure. So I do think that this new body type kind of goes away in doing that. And then we have this dial belt buckle down here that almost seems to measure the pressure that's happening with the water that's being released. And so I think that's a really cool idea. You can, of course, you know, bring it all the way around if you like. And then down here on the legs, we have these kind of strap pieces, and we have his boots. And I think a whole lot of this more beefy deluxe body is some really clever reuse from an unexpected source, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. Of course, from the back, he's also very impressive. You can see that I have his backpack on, which is removable. This just measures how much water the Snout Spout has. I love this effect that they have where it's blue paint and then it's just transparent on the top. It's a very convincing kind of look, as if water were filling it, so I think that looks terrific. Love the hoses back there and how the legs look. I think that's great. But there's definitely some unexpected moves that they've made. For instance, usually Snout Spout is portrayed with kind of a, I guess, an orangey red for his bodysuit. Here they've opted for more of the light orange, and they have some red bands with some red shoulder pads, which are new elements to the costume. And I think that the reason why they did this is they were bringing in a colorway from the original painting that you saw, like on the back of the package, where clearly it does look like that the artists intended for him to have a much lighter orange going. So I guess this brings it back to the original intention of the figure. And so that must have been their thought process there. And this kind of goes for all the colors in general. Like you look at the gloves here and they're much more, you know, of a magenta or a kind of a pinkish purple than they are the dark purple. The boots, it just seems, are just reinvented, you know, completely to just seem like something that would, I guess, be a little more appropriate for a character who is in this situation and fighting fires. They're a little more techno-y, and I think that they suit the character more. And there's definitely ways to get this figure looking more classic if you want it to. So one of the easiest ways to do that is by actually dropping the shoulder pads. So all you have to do, and of course it's funny because this mirrors what they did with Zodak in New Eternia. So basically you can see that the shoulder pads are just in there on the harness, right, in these little clips. And they just come right out. You can see that they have just a protrusion right there that keeps them locked in really well. And just completing that one step makes him a lot more in line with the original classic aesthetic. I like these shoulder pads, and I think they look good on the figure, but maybe they're a little bright for my taste. I think that this actually looks a little bit better. And then the other thing is that if you look, this new belt is actually concealing the old original. All you have to do is just take it out right here, and you can drop that completely. And that means you won't be able to have these hoses hook onto the belt, but they do have a solution for that. In his classic mode, you can pretty much just put the hoses elsewhere. Like, say for instance, this hose right here, you can actually just put it on the little storage area. And that also works for his axe over here. And for your other hose, you can actually just loop it right on to this piece from his classic chest harness. So you just pop it on and boom. Now you've got a spot for both things. And this is, you know, a much more classic version. You can see that he has the logo from his belt that he had on the original. My personal preference with this guy is I don't think the shoulder pads work all that well, but I do think that the new belt works pretty well because you can still see the blue trunks. So it's not like it really disrupts the aesthetic. So I actually like it with the belt. And as you can see, we have a really fun comparison going. This is the Origins version and compared to the new version. And of course the color difference is pretty obvious this way. You can see the darker hues all the way around, and pretty much everything has been brightened up over here. Like I said, this is a lot closer to that original promotional painting or cross-cell painting. And of course this is a little bit closer to that original figure. So it's really up to you about what you prefer. You know, I wasn't really liking the new brighter colors as much when they had these shoulder pads on, but seeing it more in the classic form, it's like it makes a lot more visual sense to me. You know, one question I had was, why does he have these red straps that are over the orange bodysuit? And they look really good. They kind of vary the figure up from the original look. But I was actually really curious about why, and maybe, just maybe, there might be some form of reuse going on with the God Skeletor figure that they did. Now, I really am not sure about this one, and of course I asked for your help down in the comments below about what you think, but I don't think it can be completely coincidental that you have these straps going at this angle, like in the same way, and then up here on the biceps. I'm almost positive that none of the chest is reused or anything like that. But I do think with the legs and with the biceps, we may have some form of reuse, although I can't be 100% sure. They could just be sort of similar to each other. Either way, like Skeletor doesn't have drop-down hips, and he does. So there are definitely mechanical differences between the two figures. They don't function exactly the same, but they are pretty much exactly the same height. And here he is standing side by side with the 40th anniversary He-Man, which is already a really, really big figure. But Snout Spout is quite a bit bigger than he is. So I think that those are a great comparison. So here's a fun comparison, and these comparisons can sometimes get me in a little bit of trouble because it can be a little iffy when you're comparing such a beloved line as classics, and a lot of people, myself included, still see it as, you know, kind of a gold standard. But there's been plenty of situations where classics can't quite match what they've been able to do with Masterverse. And sometimes even Origins, although that's much, much more rare. So what do I think between these two guys? Well, they're definitely going for two very different things. This is not the original Classics release because I'm using the Staction head. And if you don't know what a Staction is, that's from the old days of Masters when the Four Horsemen, since they couldn't necessarily complete all the remaining characters people wanted in the 2000X line, they did these non-posable figures that they called Stactions or static action figures. And this head that they released later for a head pack for 2000X characters in Classics, you could replace your Snout Spout head with this one. And I definitely think that you can definitely see more of that techno kind of influence going here. So I've always felt that this is kind of a halfway point between the classic head and the Staction head. So I felt like it was more appropriate for this comparison. I feel like this succeeds more in terms of trying to give like a presence, like a physical presence and a sculptural presence for Snout Spout. This one tends to succeed more for me color-wise. I think that they went a little too light, really, in comparison, and I would have liked to have seen the bodysuit be a little more red, and the gloves could have stood a wash, like a black wash, to kind of bring that magenta down just a little bit. whereas this guy has a perfect tone. However, you know, I think looking at who's the more impressive looking figure, or has the most presence, or is the most fun to mess around with, better articulation, more interesting snout feature, I guess, more interesting all the way around. This is a great looking figure, but I think the better figure now is this new Masterverse version. Even if I think that the orange comes out a little too light, it's still just a beautiful interpretation of the character, and it's just more interesting. It doesn't have as many paint hits. Like I said, the paint is the strong thing over here. But I think that we're kind of moving towards something a little bit better right here. But this would not be possible without the work of the Four Horsemen, who kind of pioneered more of this techno look for a Snout Spout. So credit where credit's due for the Horsemen. So I'm going to take my light and put it right over that spot, and as you can see, you get a pretty cool effect. Of course, it would have been cool if there was some way to electronically light these eyes up, I suppose. This is, I guess, a cost-effective way of giving you a really similar effect, and it looks pretty cool. Snout Spout definitely has a lot of fun articulation going on, and plenty more than most, so let's take some time to go over that. All right, first things first, I think we should start with the most exciting element, which is his snout. This is fully articulated, and I guarantee the best representation of the movement of this thing that we've ever seen. We've seen them try to use, like, you know, bendy material and stuff like in Classics, which was an absolute QC disaster for anybody who remembers how that went. Not well. So first section, you can twist it around, and it has a hinge to go up and down that moves the whole snout. Next section, you can twist it all the way around, and again, a hinge. And you get plenty of movement there too. And that hinge can either go up and down, or you can take it and rotate it side to side. Not only that, but the next one does the exact same thing. So you can rotate it, and it has a hinge. Next section, same deal. And that final section, same deal, which is a really small section to have that kind of articulation, but it really works. So you can get it to do all kinds of crazy poses. So not even just the typical stuff, you know, he can be angling the snout or whatever you need him to do. And that's of course coupled with this water shooting effect, which I think is really cool. It's cast in a translucent light blue, and I think it looks awesome. And this could really be used to great effect for photography, especially as it's out of focus, you know, and he's in focus back there. I think that looks great. I guess the next specialized articulation is the ears, which can go all the way back and pretty far forward. So I'll probably keep mine kind of in the middle, kind of out like this. And the tusks can rotate, so I think that's pretty cool too. The head does about what you'd expect here. Kind of just rotates. This tube back here can be a little oppressive about it staying up. As you can see, it wants to go back down because that tube is kind of forcing it. In terms of the arms, you can rotate, of course. You can go out to 90 degrees or a little better. You can rotate at the bicep. You have a hinge there. It's a single joint at the elbow there, and it goes to about 90 degrees, so it's pretty effective. And it also rotates at that joint as well. At the glove, you can rotate left to right. You can do the hinge movement as well at the wrist. At the chest here, there's plenty of diaphragm movement. You can crunch way down, you can go way back, you can kind of go left to right and rock it back and forth, and you can rotate it. Down here at the waist, you can just rotate that as well. And we have these awesome drop-down hips, which it appears the Masterverse team is really committed to making sure it makes it into every figure from now on. You can drop them down or pump them back up. This allows you to get some really good kicks. And for a figure like this, had they not included the drop-down hips, you never would have got a kick like that. And if you can see, if I try to put it up there, that would have been about all we could have gotten. But thanks to the drop-downs, we can do that. We also have some really good splits. We can rotate there at the upper hip. And we have a double jointed knee, which is nice. And we can rotate at the boot. We have a hinge right here at the ankle. And we have ankle rocker pivot. Now, just so you can see that in action, Snout Spout has no trouble when it comes to hitting those wide poses and keeping them. He's a very heavy figure too, so he tends to, you know, kind of hold his weight. So he balances very, very well. In terms of accessories, we already saw how he has the water effect that you can plug into the snout. But not only that, he can also use his giant axe. Now, the cool thing about this giant axe is it has a couple of ports on it. So if you really wanted to, you could utilize these hoses back here. So you can just unplug those. They're very, very modular. And they're in there really good, so I just say exercise caution. Thankfully, it's nothing like poor old Slush Head, whose tubes were made out of a hard plastic that would break just by looking at it. Here, you can plug this right into the hilt. It's kind of hard. There we go. And now you have a pretty cool little setup right there. If you're feeling really crazy, you can take this tube back here as well. So you can plug that into the top, and it's kind of a struggle. That's one thing, all the tubes are really hard to plug in. But anyway, you can have him all tubed up to the axe. It doesn't look too great, but you certainly could. I don't even know why he'd be doing this, but you could. And speaking of tube options, if you wanted to, you could plug it up to the little port that's up here. Or heck, you could even plug it up to his actual snout. I have no idea what purpose this would serve, but you certainly can do it. This also affords you the ability to take the water effect and put it in the top of the axe. Or the bottom, I guess. And it fits perfectly. So if you want him to use this as some kind of firefighting tool that has water coming out of it, you completely could. His last accessories that we didn't get a chance to talk about are alternate hands. You can see that we have a fist over here and an open hand for over here if you really want one. There's definitely so much to be said here. This is one of those statement figures that Masterverse has done. And the statement is this, that Masterverse is a legitimate line. Not only is it legitimate, but it's an awesome line. And this figure really makes a strong case for that. It's got the premium deco, it has the really cool interchangeable accessories, it has some awesome and innovative articulation with the snout, cool effects pieces, a couple of different looks for him. And plus he's just really big and really heavy. So he's the kind of deluxe figure you definitely enjoy having in your collection. Not only that, though, he's one of those figures that it's very easy to make the argument when looking at him that Masterverse is becoming a much better line than the Origins line. And that's the funny thing to me, is I feel like Masterverse doesn't get nearly as much play as Origins does. And I think we know why. Of course, Origins is the type of line that's going to appeal more to our nostalgia. However, I do think it's very difficult to look at this figure and not admit that there's something really special going on right here. And Mattel are really harnessing their resources and trying to make something that is a cut above what they've done before. And I have to say, this guy fits the bill for that dramatically. I know that the other issue is that this guy is being sold by Mattel Creations, but he's available right now this very minute. And that's the thing, there seems to be a pattern that if it's a Masterverse figure, it doesn't sell quite as well on there and it tends to stick around. But at the same time, I definitely see why they're offering this guy on Mattel Creations. Any of you all have an Ollie's nearby? It's a discount chain that gets closeout goods. They've had, I don't know, about 1 million of these guys from Origins in the past, trying to get rid of them for $5 or so, or $6 or $7, whatever it is, but they're trying to clear them out. So it's really no wonder that Mattel has to go through the Mattel Creations route to release this guy. Not only that, but I think he's something like $30 or $33. So I know that that can also be a tough pill to swallow, but honestly, he's worth every bit of that. There's plenty of figure lines that are charging between $25 and $30, and I'm looking at you, Marvel Legends, to where you wouldn't get a figure this big or that has this many features or interchangeable parts. And this guy's $33, so to me the value is there, and it does make sense to charge that much for this guy. What does hurt is once you add the shipping on there, he becomes more like a $41 or $42 figure, which isn't so great. But I will say this about shipping. This guy was just first available just a few days ago, and they got him to me at breakneck speed, faster than Amazon Prime usually gets my stuff. So I don't know what it was about this guy necessarily, but they certainly got to work quick on getting the figure to me, so I really appreciate that. But it's Snout Spout. What can I say? I love Snout Spout. He has such a cool design. Always one of my favorites. It's just awesome to have him with the other new Eternia figures. But of course, don't forget that I'm going to have a massive display of new Eternia figures posed right here with the Eternia playset, along with other Masterverse figures. So it's definitely something that you'll want to check out in my Ultimate Battlegrounds Volume 2 video, which will be uploaded here in a few days. Alright guys, well that's all for me. I certainly hope that you've enjoyed this review, and if you did, it would mean the world to me if you could hit that subscribe button and like the video, because that really helps me out here on the channel as I attempt to grow it towards more and more subscribers We've had a lot of success here lately, and it really does help, especially since we have our first child on the way. It's very much appreciated. And of course, comment down below and let me know what your thoughts on this guy are. You think it deviated too much from the original, especially in the color palette? Or do you believe that this is a really nice update and it's a figure worth owning? Which one do you prefer, Masterverse or Origins? I would love to hear your opinions, and who knows, I may even do a dedicated video about the debate. But with all that being said, as always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out. So, is it a mask?
I don't want to talk about it.